will do that. And in the state of Virginia, your new governor, Abigail Spanberger, seems to be indicating that she's willing to work with President Trump, with the Trump administration, to find common ground. She was talking to our Fox Digital friends saying, I'm the new Virginia governor, and affordability is what everyone needs. Now, what exactly that looks like, we don't know, but she also writes in an op-ed on foxnews.com, I'm ready to work with anyone, including President Trump, to make life less expensive because high costs and the inability to retain and attract top talent to Virginia affect everyone, no matter your party affiliation and no matter if your company has 5 employees or 5,000.
Well, it will certainly be interesting. I think that incoming Governor Spanberger is definitely sort of laying out a different track. We've seen a lot of Democrats try to make a name for themselves by just being adversarial and by attacking President Trump. And the problem for them, of course, is that so many of the issues that President Trump has picked out have been these 80-20 issues that even Democrats support. They may not like Donald Trump, but they like where he is on a lot of these issues. And so Democrats have managed to sort of pick all of the low-hanging fruit by just attacking and attacking Donald Trump. And they've made a lot of money doing it, and a lot of them have made names for themselves. I think that Abigail Spanberger, who has a history of being trying to position herself as more of a moderate Democrat, is clearly trying to lay out a path of actually trying to work with President Trump where she can. The question will be, does she succeed? I know that the guy at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is desperate to work with Democrats, would love to work with Democrats. So it'll be interesting to see if she actually follows through on that.
Well, I find this interesting, too, because she just won big time in her race against Winsome Sears, right? So it's not like she feels like she's got to, moderate necessarily. I mean, she just won handily. Like, she won the election big time against Winsome Sears. I wonder, too, I mean, you look at least the northern part of the state of Virginia, you've got a lot of federal workers who live there as well. So I wonder how much of this, too, is working with President Trump. Obviously, President Trump has taken an interest in reducing the size and scope of the federal workforce. Knowing that we have a bloated federal workforce, so that's been one of the key issues of trying to, have a more efficient with less with government workers. So I wonder too if part of this is trying to protect that federal workforce, of wanting to work with President Trump on that, maybe shield them. I don't know, but this is interesting just because she doesn't need to do this necessarily. She just won. But I think it's welcome news. Look, we need more bipartisanship. It doesn't happen anymore.
Well, true. And, a little bit to Charlie's point, maybe it could be that she has watched what has happened when Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has repeatedly called Donald Trump a Nazi and attacked him, when Governor Gavin Newsom has been attacking around the clock President Trump, whether Minnesota Governor Tim Walz blames fraud on his watch on Donald Trump. How is that working out for the residents of California, Minnesota, or Illinois? It's not benefiting them. And so she may be saying, wait a minute, let's work with the Trump administration because I'm going to do what's right for Virginians.
Yeah, and of course, it's all of these stupid political fights, partisan fights, that completely lose sight of the actual issues and the issues that matter. And you wind up with the Democrat Party that goes completely Looney Tunes. And obviously I'm more of a conservative, but I want a sane Democrat Party. I don't want one insane party and one sane party. I want two sane parties that disagree. And, of course, it's the centrists in the Democrat Party that have disappeared. Wall Street Journal headline writing, Democratic centrists want to fight and prove they will take on the establishment. Crop of moderate Democrats trying to counter Trump and progressive influence in their own party. Going on to say, centrists have become more willing to take on hardball tactics, adopt a populist tone, and in some cases, a resistance to compromise that liberal activists have been pushing for years. Increasingly, they are distancing themselves from their own party. Democrat candidates across the country are trying to shed the label that they are weak by showing that they are willing to be more provocative. And I think that, Lisa, your point is such an important one, that Spanberger is choosing to do this not because she was forced to, but because she sees it as a benefit to her. And I welcome it, and I think that whatever Democrat there is that figures that out and is willing to stand up to their own party first is going to be the Democrat that we're talking about in 3 years.
Well, it'll be interesting right now because obviously the Democrats, because they don't hold the White House, they have no leader. You know, typically when you're not in the White House, you don't really have a designated party leader. So they're trying to find themselves. And then after the shellacking they got in 2024, you see a lot of generational divide, ideological divide in the party. We saw that with Mamdani as well, and Senator Chuck Schumer's refusal to endorse him. You know, they didn't really know what to do with Mamdani. So I think this midterm is going to be interesting to see what direction the Democrat Party goes in. But I'm wondering, too, because the economy looks like it's starting to turn around. And then also Americans will feel some of the benefits of the big, beautiful bill after this, upcoming tax cycle as well. So Republicans could be well positioned heading in the midterms. We'll see what the polling looks like on how Americans feel about the economy. And I wonder if we'll see what we saw before the 2024 election. Remember when we saw Democrats Senator Casey, who lost in Pennsylvania against Dave McCormick, he started running ads trying to tie himself to President Trump heading into the presidential election cycle. So we knew that it looked like it was going to be a good cycle for President Trump based on that. So if the economy is booming and Americans are starting to feel satisfied about the issue of affordability, do Democrats take sort of a less antagonistic approach to President Trump heading into the midterms? We'll see.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.